All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Faith, Family, and Wrestling. I am the host with the most embarrassment because I promoted big time this past week. Go and watch First Time Ever. It's on tonight, and it wasn't. It's next week. So I encourage you guys check that out when it comes out. First Time Ever. It's going to be an awesome pay-per-view, but that's my embarrassment. I am Joey. I'm so glad to be here, but I don't want to talk about me too much. I don't want to talk about Joe either. We've got a special guest, but I'm going to let Joe introduce himself before we get on to our special guest today.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Joe Matthews. I am the voice of Hard Knocks Wrestling and also a co-host here at Faith, Family, and Wrestling. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest. He is a YouTube sensation. He teaches people all over the world how to grapple and how to make wrestling look amazing. He's been in every company you can think of: WWE, Impact, Ring of Honor, maybe Ring of Honor. I don't know. Were you in Ring of Honor? Ring of Honor. Yeah, I won't mess it up too much. He's been everywhere. And our special guest today is Tyson Dux. How you doing today, Tyson?
Good, guys. How are you guys doing? Thanks for the intro. Yes, it's basically the only place that you missed there was probably ECW and WCW, and I almost had my shot with WCW just before they folded. I legitimately was almost on my way down. I would have had them all.
Well, what about the other companies? What about you have any chances on AEW right now?
I've gone down to AEW a few times now, once, and then we were in talks to do something again, but that was back in March. So you know what happened back in March.
Yeah.
It's basically been this, the highlight of this year is like, if you just say March, everybody knows like, that's too bad.
Yeah. We call it BC, before COVID.
Right. Yeah. It's basically it.
So, we'll just go ahead and get started with, you've been, I want to say pretty much everywhere. You've had a pretty long career, a good career. You've had a chance to wrestle a lot of people. When I was looking through the list, you've wrestled some of our favorites right now: Kyle O'Reilly. You've wrestled Tyler Black, now Seth Rollins. You've been in the ring with Motor City Machine Guns, Mr. Anderson. Like, the list goes on and on and on. Just to get things kicked off, who would you say is your favorite match out of all of these guys that you've had a chance to be in the ring with?
It doesn't get a lot of hype because I was so badly hurt during it, but the one with Kyle O'Reilly is one of my favorites. With guys that have a bit of a name value, Kyle is just like a tremendous wrestler and like a very solid athlete. And the night that we got to wrestle and finally lock up, it was nice. It was nice to finally be in there with them. But I had been hurt. When was that? It was I believe it was June or July. I had that match. I got a concussion back in April, and a severe one where I lost about 40 minutes of memory and time. So I don't there's about 40 minutes of my life that I'll never ever get back. But I was conscious on one side. So the spot was I got speared through ropes. It was a low boy ring or a pony show ring. You know what I mean? It's one of those low ones. And I didn't take that adjustment into consideration. When I got the spear, I hit my head on the tile floor. It was a massive tile floor. Tile's hard as a rock because it is rock. And it split the side of my head open. That took 3 staples to close. And so that wasn't the worst of it. Like, that's just skin tears happen. But what happened was, after that match in April, it took me about 7 months. And the stupid part is I wrestled every weekend after. I just kept going because that's what we do in this business. We'd suck it up, kid, and go work. But I worked every weekend after that, every single weekend. And I was hurt for about 6 months, where it was like I was under such a major concussion that I was underwater. It felt like I couldn't see right. I couldn't hear anything right. And like, light bothered me and I could barely formulate sentences. I had to really process it in my brain. And so on that night, I was still messed up quite a bit. And that whole first section of that match is, and if you watch it, it's with What Culture, is actually Kyle just warming me up and trying to get the gears rolling. And he's a real pro. And like, just, I can't say enough good things about Kyle. He's definitely one of my favorites.
Awesome. Let me ask you this, with Kyle and guys like that, what are some things, because like you said, you've been wrestling since WCW was around. You've been around. What is it like for you as a guy, as I like to call, as a super adult, with these younger guys in the ring? What's it like wrestling with them? Do you learn from even the younger wrestlers, or do you often feel like you're the one training these guys coming in?
Yeah. I've never been asked that. Yeah. I've been wrestling since 97. So I started in 97. So we're spanning decades now, decades of time. 90, 2000, 210. Yeah. So 4 decades now. I'm in my 4th decade, guys.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's stupid. That's so stupid. 4 decades of wrestling. That being said, guys like that have respect. There's very much a respect thing for your vets when it comes to our business. I'm always learning. I'm always wanting to learn. The new style has evolved quite a bit. So to keep up, I have to let them, guide in a few areas, whereas I would guide in other areas and would have my say in other things. But mostly it's very much a mutual respect. I respect these younger athletes that come in and have a different kind of approach and stuff like that. And I just try to spread a little bit of wisdom my way and stuff so we can kind of meet in the middle. So it's never, it's definitely is a working together type arrangement where I'm not trying to push my style or my views on them, and they're not trying to do it on me. We try to find the middle, and that's usually when those matches happen like that, they're the best.
Yeah.
And those guys are at that level though too, because they started not too long after me. So they have an old school respect that's slowly going away now, because vets don't stay around very often anymore.
Something about going to Hollywood or something like that. I don't know, but
right. Yeah. Well, that's it. And then the pace is so much so much harder, and there's a lot of social media stuff, and a lot of the older guys won't have the social media stuff, and you can't really survive unless you do a little bit of social media. And it's just, you know what I mean? Like Ole Anderson is not going to survive in this market. I wish he would, because if you could bring Ole Anderson back to, rough up some kids, I would love it, but it's never going to happen. Right?
Yeah. Like he was already, maybe it's a good thing he doesn't have social media, because I'm pretty sure we wouldn't like what he was saying half the time.
Well, I would love it. Are you kidding me? And I'll listen to all the podcasts from all those guys. Like even a lot of guys don't like Jim Cornette. The new guys don't like Jim Cornette. And I don't like the way he comes off a lot of the times, being very offensive and aggressive towards the kids and stuff like that. Like, you don't have to call anybody an idiot. You could just say your point. But he does bring up a lot of great points about when this business used to draw money and the history of this business, and like why things don't work today as much as they did back in the day. Right. Yeah. So you got to give those old guys, you got to give them credit. Like Ole would be a laugh riot to listen to.
That's
him,
true.
Because I'm sure he won't watch any of this current product at all with, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He wouldn't. He just wouldn't.
And that's one thing where we talk to our students a lot, because I help out at a wrestling training school. Is so many of these guys are recording a match and they want to go put it on YouTube after we do a training session. I'm like, you guys cannot put this stuff on YouTube. Like, we need to keep the stuff behind closed doors. We can't be putting it out for everyone to see all the time because, what's the point?
Right.
Like,
right. And
I don't want to give too much away on the podcast to people. It's just stuff behind closed doors that needs to stay there. So,
well, and another thing too is these kids need to realize that what they think is so great right now is going to be the most embarrassing thing of their lives in about a couple of years when they actually get some actual time and knowledge into what we do. Like somebody had my first match on VHS. And I want to keep it as to preserve it as a way of saying, like to show kids like where you start is not where you can finish,
right,
as kind of an encouragement thing. But it's so dreadfully, painfully bad. I would never subject anybody to watching that 12 minutes of garbage. It's so bad. It's so bad.
Yeah, I have my first matches on Facebook because I was one of those guys like, oh, yeah, record this, put it on Facebook so people can see my first match. And I'm like, I need to delete this because, it is. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I was lost there. I had no idea what was going on there. And I'm just waiting to get kicked right here because I'm just dumb.
Right. Right. Yeah. You're just going through what you've learned in class. Learn how to, I'm just going to do what they taught me. I've learned 3 things. I'm going to do these 3 things. I'm probably going to repeat it a couple times and then so on and so on. Right. Yeah. That's just the way. Yeah.
Yeah. No psychology, no nothing. Just some idiot running around, use Jim Cornette's term, some idiot running around the ring. Just like, I'm a wrestler.
Yeah. That's basically it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
But speaking of, our first matches, do you recall the match or a storyline, anything? What made you decide this is what I want to do? I want to pursue a career in professional wrestling.
Well, I'm a kid born in 78, so I grew up in the 80s. So I grew up like a real like in the man's man era of TV and media. So not the manliest of men, because that would be 50s, 60s and all those guys come back from World War II that are real men. You know what I mean? But like the 80s was the time when like you had He-Man and you had Voltron and you had G.I. Joe, and like wrestling was like with Hulk Hogan was so prevalent, and like WWF just became the biggest wrestling company in the world, but yet still there was NWA. It was right there, and then NWA turned into WCW. So there was so much stuff like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Rocky, and just the list goes on of just testosterone fueled childhood where like you wanted to be those things. Like I wanted to be a boxer. I wanted to be Rocky. I wanted to be I wanted to be Hulk Hogan. I wanted to be all these guys. So it was always something that kind of stuck with me. And when I was 17 and I just graduated from high school, my parents went through a bit of a rough patch. So my dad left home for a little bit, and it was really rough. And what it was basically my moment of like clarity, like stupid kid clarity of thinking, you know what, I want to, if I'm going to work like my parents and just do what they did and just go along with working hard and stuff like that, I'm just going to do what I enjoy. If this is it, if in their 40s things start to fall apart and their lives are completely chaos, like why not do what you want to do? Why get a 9-to-5? Why work in a factory? Why do any of this? So I decided like, hey, I'm gonna pursue something that no one thought I could do. I'm only 5'8". I'm a small guy. I'm like, we were just talking before we started this podcast that we had Akeem and Ted DiBiase and these guys that you don't think are huge were absolute massive human beings.
Oh yeah.
And I'm in the 90s. It is still this way. There's very few little guys in the 90s. So me being 5'8" and only a 200-pound farm kid, I thought, well, I'm gonna take my shot, and if I have to lick my wounds and come home, I will. But I never came home. I just left, and I never came back. That was it.
Now, what did it take to get into wrestling? Because I know nowadays you can go to a school. There's a school that all over the place. Wherever you want to go, you can find a school. What was it like back in the 90s trying to get into wrestling?
See, it was a lot harder back then. There was a few places that you could find in like the back of magazines, like the ads, where they would say, hey, become a wrestler. You know what I mean? Are you good at football? Become a wrestler. But it was like, I think it was in grade 12. So it was in 96. The internet was kind of a thing, especially like backwoods New Brunswick, Canada, like, oh, this World Wide Web. What is this all about? With dial up, you know what I mean? And that basically, as I graduated, my parents had gotten internet. So there was like actual internet. And I just looked up professional wrestling schools because my idea was I knew of Stampede. I knew of the Dungeon. I knew Stu Hart. And that's where I was going to head and start my career, was going to the Dungeon in Alberta. But then what happened was I typed it in because I was looking for the info. And the first thing that came up, because I put Hart Brothers Wrestling School or Hart Wrestling School, and Hart Brothers Wrestling School out of Ontario was a thing. And that was run by the oldest Hart, being Smith Hart, who had a hand in it for a brief second. So I moved to Ontario because it's half the distance, and I thought it would be easier. And the guy that run that place, I contacted him, and he just fed me a real good, he sold me pretty good on it. It wasn't what it was supposed to be, as they never are. But then I went there, and I just decided to start. I lived in Ontario, and I moved here, and I never looked back. I've lived in Ontario ever since 17 going on 18. This is where I've lived.
Awesome. With living in Ontario, because there's a lot of great wrestlers that have come out of Ontario, and Joe's all the way down in California. I'm over in Indiana. We're United States. We don't know Canada as well. Tell us about the wrestling. Like, what do you love so much about the wrestling in Canada?
Well, wrestling in Canada is it's very close knit. Like there's it's really hard to get into wrestling in Canada if you aren't already a bit of a draw or a name or have some credentials, because it's a niche market. So there's a lot of people, like, you can only run with a certain amount of guys. It's hard for guys to get started here because Ontario has a ton of shows. It has more shows than any other province in Canada. And it has more because we have more cities per capita kind of deal, and they're closer to get to, but a 2-hour drive between each town. So we have a lot of different promotions. So the work is plentiful, but they're only going to use the same cluster of guys. And if you're good, if you're really solid, they're going to only use you. You know what I mean? So right. I can just bounce from town to town, to city, with especially now when I first started, I couldn't, but like now I can just bounce wherever. That being said, if I'm working with people, young kids, and they get to work with me a little bit, then they improve so much quicker than just two kids that are fresh out of school working with each other 100 times. It's just the way it is, right? You're naturally going to progress when you're with vets that know what they're doing and can kind of lead you along and drag you along. So that's the deal. Like, whoever's in here, whatever top notch guys that are always on the same shows are really, really good, because all we do is work every single weekend, the same guys in the same areas and all this stuff. And we've really perfected what we do. Right. So that's what makes Canada stand out. Now, the drawback to being in Canada is if you're not in Ontario, it just means a ton of driving for less shows. It also means you have no exposure. Like the exposure that our guys get up here is just like maybe 5%. And then if you're in the States, if you're an American and you're working in the States, you can go as high as the moon. Like if you're not, especially nowadays with media and the way it is, and like if you can get in a car and travel and you're American, you can work whatever state you want. You should be like, technically, if you're a solid wrestler, you should be signed in about 2-3 years. And I know that seems crazy, but in this market nowadays, it's very doable. You just got to be good, or at least competent with it.
Right.
Okay. Now let me ask you this, because you talked about bouncing around, and I know indie wrestling is way different, especially going from indie company to indie company is way different than wrestling as the same character with storylines through every single week. What's the difference? Because I know a lot of guys go from indie to up into, I don't want to say the main leagues, but up into the companies. And then for you, you went from the companies back into the indies. What is that like?
It's basically freedom is what it is on an independent level. And I'm not a fan of I'm not a fan of indie wrestling. This is the part that's gonna like suck for everybody. Is I'm not a fan of indie wrestling because it's basically a lot of guys that run shows because they feel as though they're like armchair quarterbacks. It feels
right.
though, I can be Vince McMahon. I can be better than Vince McMahon with no experience, no training, no years in the business, no anything. They just have enough money to buy a ring and set up in a venue and run a show, book a bunch of their friends or people they think are good, and then they just put matches on. So I'm not a fan. I'm not a huge fan of indie wrestling, especially with the way it is in the present climate. I am a fan of the territory system where a guy would come in and work that one area and just work to hit their towns with the same promotion for a long time and build a name and stuff like that. It's more to my liking. Being with bigger companies though, it's like you get the perks of like catering every day and hotels, and like you get to be on a massive side of media coverage, and more people see you and get more eyes on you. But on the other side of it, like you have to do what you're told, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you have a job, you do what you're told on most things. But on the independents, you have a little bit more freedom to be able to express how you would like to wrestle. Like I take my stuff very seriously. I like my stuff to look very competitive, and I like my stuff to look real. I want real professional wrestling to look real. I feel, and here's my philosophy on it is, and I tell this to a lot of people when I do reviews online and stuff, is wrestling, everybody that buys a ticket to professional wrestling isn't there to be entertained. And I know that's weird. No, just hold on here. Nobody in, like, if you are a mom with kids and your dad and you want to take your kid to a show, you are not there to be entertained. Because if you want real entertainment, you'll go to a high budget movie, you'll go to a rock show where there's high budget, high entertainment with high production value. What you do when you go to a professional wrestling event, especially a local professional wrestling event, is you're looking to be deceived. That's basically it. You're basically looking at going to magic shows, because everybody wants to believe that David Copperfield can actually make a tiger disappear and then he can float midair by himself. They want to believe that he has magical powers, supernatural.
You mean he doesn't?
Powers. Right? Right?
Oh.
You know what I mean? Right? What was he blessed by, for goodness sake?
Yeah.
But and nobody goes to a magic show and wants to see the tripwires. They don't want to see the mirrors. They don't want to see how the illusion's done. They want to believe that this is real. They want to get lost in the magic, and that is professional wrestling. People go to a wrestling show to be deceived, to be lost in the fact that this is a competitive contest that is a little bit more outlandish than a violent MMA match, or the sometimes can be boring boxing matches. It's something that you're scratching an itch for people, and unfortunately, that's completely missing from today's thing. And that's the way I choose to run my business. Is I want to give these people all those matches were cool, but that guy, that ugly Canadian guy that like grabbed that kid's wrist and bent it backwards, and I think he mumbled something like he wants to break that guy's wrist. That's mean. That's scary. Was that real?
Yeah.
Was that real? And that's the kind of stuff I want. Because nobody's going to remember if you could do a cool backflip, but everybody's going to remember the original Sheik with his fork and stabbing Dusty Rhodes in the head. Everybody that saw that, and I know older people in their 50s that said, that scared me to death when he came near me and he had a fork in his hand. It was scary, and that's what you want.
Yes. And speaking of grabbing people by the wrist and wanting to break it or making it look like you're going to break it, you have blessed the wrestling community for who wants to take the time to do it with several videos showing different holds, different styles. Was like you guys are going between a headlock and an arm bar the other day for what, like 13 minutes, 15 minutes of just back and forth. I was blown up. I was like, holy cow, I need to work on my cardio to watch this video. So what inspired you to start putting these videos on YouTube of just showing they're simple, but they're not. Like there's a beauty to what you do with a key lock and an arm lock or a wrist lock. You know, what made you want to do that?
So this project has ballooned and has gone far beyond what I thought it was going to go. It started out when I came home from Europe, from traveling WXW in Germany and then PCW in England. I came home with no work happening anymore. Everything was canceled. Every day somebody messaged me and said, this is canceled. So my whole calendar in the matter of the month of March shut down completely, with no end in sight. So me and my son were the first ones to start, and all we did was like, I need to be able to still be productive in professional wrestling, especially since I rent a gym, a studio where my ring is set up, and I still pay every month to have no students in here. I pay every month to just have an empty place. So I'm like, I have to get the most out of this lease, because if I don't, I'll just go crazy. I'll be frustrated and very angry and bitter, and I don't want to be that guy. So I put my foot forward. Me and my son came in here. We started doing some explanations on stuff that I wanted to go over, because I want to make professional wrestling look like professional wrestling. Mm-hmm. And so I started to do it, and then I started to dabble down the Luthez hole of watching professional wrestling from the 50s and 60s. And I'm like, I've completely, even in my career, have completely skimmed over what made this business great and why this business was so solid. And like, I've completely, in my own time, have done enough damage to it. I don't want to see it damaged anymore. I feel as though the product and what it represents is completely gone now. So I want to kind of bring it back. So my idea was, I don't want to judge anybody. I don't want to be telling anybody they're stupid or their stuff's bad. All I was doing was wanting to put out content that would educate, and hopefully people would get on board with the same type of philosophy. And it seems to be, for the most part, it's working. Yeah. A couple of videos in, I have my guy Scotty Dux, who's my co-producer, and he's the guy that helps me film now and stuff like that. And he's my media guy, and we hammer out stuff all the time, basically working on the knowledge and working on that old vibe of real old school professional wrestling that is completely gone now. And that's basically what we're doing now. We're loving every minute of it too, because it keeps me busy and keeps me sane.
Yeah, and I don't lie, I watched all 61 holds in 61 days. Like, that's what got my attention. I think I started on video 4 is the first time it popped up on my feed of 61 and 61. So I started it, went through it, and I was like, man, this is great. And, you know, my son's a professional wrestler too. He's he's 21 now. Oh my gosh. But I was about to say he's 18, but that was a long time ago. That's when he debuted. Right. But I'm always like, hey, I just saw this. Come here. And he's like, what? I'm like, I got to try this real quick to see how it, you know, I watched on the video and I got to apply it. So he got a lot of lessons in the living room.
That's awesome.
So,
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's what I've had now, like lately, which is great. It's actually getting such traction that I know the guys in the higher markets and in the TV markets. I know those guys are watching. I know every one of them, because I get, like, every once in a while I get texts from certain guys in TV saying, dude, come on. Like, I'm not that bad. They'll just tease me, right? Saying like, come on, dude, I'm not that bad. Why do you got to harp on me that bad about my thoughts? But and then I have people from like Wales, and I've had guys from Poland, and I've had guys from Dubai all say, you know, we got our school in Dubai and we watch it every week. I know, like, we just did a thing for Jimmy Rave, who lost his arm, unfortunately. So he had a GoFundMe set up. So I tried to help him out. He was, like, appreciative. And he was just saying, like at CCW, where he coaches at now, he says all those guys watch those videos every week, which is, yeah, it's good. It's good. I like the fact that I can just be some kind of like a bit of a beacon for old school wrestling.
Yeah.
And especially in this modern day time.
Do you feel like, you said, you know, some of the guys are watching that are on TV. Do you ever watch the TV and go, yeah, they were watching that video this week? I see, because I will tell you, even now, like over the last probably 2 months, I've even noticed more technical wrestling happening on TV. Now I'm going to say it's probably all because of Tyson Dux. He's changed wrestling already just with YouTube videos.
That, you know what? Let's go with that. We'll just say that it was me that did all this. I know that like Drew Gulak and Kyle O'Reilly and those guys have always been the forefront of saying, yo, they have no, you know, in this business, you get very selfish sometimes. You get very selfish and very you're only self-aware. So you only do your own thing. Those guys are so above all that stuff, and they have a good spot and they're great. So they have no problem saying, yo, if you're not watching Tyson's stuff, what's wrong with you? So I know there's guys, you know what I mean? These are friends of mine, like Gulak and O'Reilly. These guys are solid dudes that I chat with every once in a while. And they've just said, like, oh, okay, well, you should be watching this. And that has spurred on a whole thing. And there's so many good things that are missing from professional wrestling now. Like, we went over that Thez series of forgotten stuff, 12 Days of Thesmus. And the stuff, yes. Like, I just calling people out on, like, where did the atomic drop go? And why can't we sell it properly? Or where's the slingshot? Why is that gone? Or airplane spin? Or how, like, the amount of guys, and I called people out on them. Like, I've watched professionals in a TV setting use the ropes to rake eyes and completely butcher it. Like, what? Like, all it does is take a little bit of forethought and a little bit of work to be able to do what we do. And all, you know what I mean? You just can't wing it. You got to be able to know how to do it. So hopefully everybody, because the more guys that use this stuff on TV, the better product will be.
Right. Yeah. And it's good too, because you bring back a technical style. You know, there's nothing wrong with the high flying style, but like you said earlier, you know, the clashes of styles, and if you can blend the two styles against each other in a match, it makes a great match versus two guys who are either, you know, well, two guys with the same exact style. Sometimes that can get really boring watching. So
right.
Yeah. So why not bring back this
That's
old
the
school
thing,
stuff?
too.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing too, because I do my reviews and I've told all the kids so far, like every single one of them, like they've been very athletic and they look great. And they have great gear. And it's not like that when I started, like we had hand-me-down knee pads and old banged up boots and couldn't get tights made. You had to go to like a sports store and get like Speedo type trunks and like just awful stuff.
Yeah.
Nowadays, everybody's so professionally built and made. So you got to give them credit for that. But then they go for they only know how to do moves because that's all they know. They have video games and then they're taught moves, but they don't learn how to do story or psychology or heat or sympathy or any of that stuff. It's so easy to get reaction, but reaction goes away instantly because it is a reaction. What you want to do is draw on emotion. And once you get people emotionally invested and connected, you have those people for life, man. Like right now, let me ask you a question, both you guys, Jay and Jay. Let me ask you a question. You're as you guys both grew up watching professional wrestling. What stands out right now? You only got 5 seconds to shoot out there. As a kid, what stands out to you as a moment in wrestling
throughout our lives?
Yes.
Hogan Warrior.
Okay.
Just their lockup. The lockup. That first.
There you go.
Yeah. The test of strength, man. That as a kid, I was standing up in my living room screaming, wanting Warrior to dethrone Hogan.
What about you, Joey? What was it, man?
For me, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, and not the screw job, but everything leading up to the screw job.
So the story.
Yeah, the story build.
That's like, see, these two moments will stand out and be etched in your brain for life. Mine is, because I'm from the 80s, right? Yeah. Is Hacksaw Jim Duggan being attacked by Andre the Giant when Andre grabbed his singlet and choked him out. And then it took everybody in the back to try to tear Andre off of him. And no one could get him off. And they were hitting him with chairs. And like there were people crying in the arena. Like they were so emotionally wrecked by that whole thing. And as a small kid, it emotionally wrecked me. I was never a huge Hacksaw fan until that moment when Andre the Giant looked like he was murdering him. And that will stay in my brain forever. There was no flips. There was no big dives. There was no like crazy reel or special effects coming down the ramp. All it was Andre choking the absolute life out of him and no one could get him off. That was it. And that'll stay with me till the day I die. That's one of those moments.
Yep. See, we did a whole episode based on those moments that stand out. Because, like Hogan Warrior, but then there was Earthquake when he broke Hogan's ribs.
Yep.
When he and then when he squished Damien, he did the Earthquake. Like, we did a whole episode on when we were kids, what were the things in wrestling that we still think about. And I'm like, those are all moments that, they pulled on you so hard. Like Hogan getting stretchered out because Earthquake crushed his ribs. And, I think I was like 7 or 8, whatever it was. I'm like writing letters to WWE and getting a postcard back, quote unquote signed by Hulk Hogan saying, thanks, Hulkamaniac, but that's the stuff that, like, I don't care who's going to be like, oh, you're a fan. Well, we're all fans. If we weren't fans, very few fans get into this business, except for guys who are like Brock Lesnar and are freaks of nature. But we all started as fans.
Yes. Yeah, most definitely. You wouldn't put yourself through it.
Yeah. And one guy we were talking about before the show started was Ted DiBiase, $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. We've all got to interact with Ted, one of the nicest guys in the world. But even for me, it wasn't as a child. I watched it later in life because I'm not quite that old yet. But was when he kicked the ball, when he had the little kid bounce the basketball, and he just kicked the basketball. That still to me was like a Like, not only is he dastardly, that is how dastardly this guy is. And like you said, they make it real. You didn't think this was a play or a TV show. That was, even going back as an adult watching it, I go, man, he's a jerk.
What a jerk.
Why did I shake his hand?
Yeah. Or basically Roddy Piper in the 80s. Anything Roddy Piper did in the 80s.
Yes. And like, and just the little things like $1 Million Man choking these guys out, putting them to sleep, and then shoving dollars in their mouth. Like, just the worst, just driving it in there. I remember that as a kid, driving his finger and driving that money right in their mouth. And like, that is such a disrespectful thing to do to an adult man. And as a kid thinking like, that's so disrespectful. Like, why would anybody do that just because he had money? You know what I mean? It's just, that's the stuff that will stay with you. Unfortunately, we don't have that. We like, again, this is why everybody does stunt shows and falls through stuff. Like, you will never, ever, ever remember a guy falling off a stage or going through tables or anything like that. You just remember the stuff that, like, the ECW for me, nothing really stands out because there's always tables and chairs and all this stuff. The one that stands out though is Shane Douglas grabbing the Pitbull's neck brace when he broke his neck, and he was ripping back and forth, and it's pinned to his head, and then the fans completely rioted. Like, it turned into an absolute pandemonium and chaos. And those are the kind of moments that will make ECW kind of live on in a lot of ways, opposed to like the garbage style, the hardcore junkie wrestling. You know what I'm saying? So it's all, like I say all the time, is emotion. You want an emotional connection. You don't want reaction, because reaction will just be forgotten in a week.
Yeah. Now I will say, you're talking about emotional connection. There's a project that you have done where you got to actually do a little bit of acting. You got to become Mr. Hollywood for a second for Dark Side of the Ring. And you got to play Chris Benoit. What was that like? I'm sure the emotional I know just watching it, emotionally, you get super drawn into it. I'm sure having to pull into that character. What was that like?
First of all, those guys are like super talented. The guys that Jason and Evan, who are the guys that have really made this thing go, Jason being the director and the producer being Evan, these dudes just, like, the vision they had for this show is just good TV. If you're not a wrestling fan, you could sit down and watch that. Yeah, it's such great TV. And I know they had me scouted to be Benoit, and then like I actually said, hey, I'll do that, because I was in the pilot with the Brody pilot being Dutch Mantel. I had a beard at the time, so they put me as Dutch. And then later on, they asked me, hey, do you know anybody who can play Benoit? And I said, well, I can play Benoit. It's like, that's the guy I grew up, like, in my teenage years wanting to be, because he's my height, he's similar build, and he's the most intense, scariest human being ever. I always loved Benoit's work. I can do that. And they said, oh, good, because we wanted you to. We just didn't know how to ask you how to do it. So, all right, I'm like, I'll shave my beard then. Here we go. So it was me as Benoit was like, and a lot of people got offended by this, and they can stay offended. That's fine. It was an honor to play him, because I'm not looking at what led to the end of his life, because I'm not there. I don't understand how that happened. I don't understand his rationale and his thinking. I can't think about that stuff. But I just remember the guy that I actually looked up to and would talk to at venues and stuff when I was with WWE at the time. And that guy, that's the guy I remember. And that's the guy that I wanted to be when I started. So to play him was quite an honor. I loved every minute of it. I loved being like wearing the Four Horsemen tights, and I loved his WrestleMania stuff where he won the championship, and like the being able to do the scenes with Black Tiger and stuff like that. Like it was all just great. And it's such great TV. And Evan and Jason were great too, because anytime we came to a scene that was going to be a little rough, they would show me the tape where they showed the interviews, and then I would be able to see the interviews and see how the people like Chavo or Chris's son, they would explain stuff, and then I'm like, oh, okay. So it would give you a bit of your base, and it would give you a little bit of a buffer to know what you're about to get into, especially in the hanging scene where he hung himself. And they kept it very tasteful. It wasn't very negative. Like wasn't negative. It wasn't shocking for the sake of shock. It was actually a informative TV, and it was just great. I loved it.
Did it help you? Because you said not only did you get to hear the interviews of the wrestlers, but also connecting even with like the interviews of his son. How did that affect you as a parent? Because you're a father of how many kids do you have now?
I have four.
Okay, you're one up on me. I got 3 right now. So
okay,
yeah,
I got you beat. I got 4. I got 20, 18, 4, and 19 months. That's what I got.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, stupid. Crazy.
You spread them all out.
I like the hardest working man in the business, both like professionally and family. You know what I mean? I'm a hardworking guy. That being said, the one that it was okay. Like his son has a little bit of disconnect because his older son lived with his mom. So he would only come down and visit. The part that really broke me though was Chavo, because I know Chavo. Me and Chavo talk every once in a while, and that whole scene. And Chavo's such a cool dude, and he's not that emotional. He's just a really just chill vibe human being. So chill. And I know I watched his interview or his interview segment where they're talking about Eddie, having Eddie in his arms, and then Eddie still with them. And I remember he was saying he was still there, man. He was still there. He was like, as he's interviewing, and he's breaking down right there. And it crushed me. Like it crushed me to see how he sat there. Like his uncle was his hero, right?
Yeah.
As Eddie was a hero to all of us, really, who were in the business. And just watching him break down, I messaged him like the day after, right after. I said, dude, I knew, and I knew what happened when it happened, but I just didn't know. I just didn't know how badly, because you don't know unless you know. You don't know.
Yeah.
And I just told him, I'm like, dude, I just want you to know that how sore. I know I've said it sorry in the past, but it really stuck with me, and I just wanted you to know. You know what I mean? Because that moment where Eddie passes away is basically the beginning of the end of Chris. There's a disconnect from life and from like any kind of social interaction. When Eddie died, Chris basically started to shut down. So
man, that's brutal. That is brutal. Tough. But with that, I want to go into a little bit lighter of a subject after
start bringing this
real
back
deep
up now.
right there. Yeah, we're doing upper real quick. We were reading an article in the Huffington Post, and I really enjoyed this because it's about rough and tumble play, and you were one of the highlighted Wrestling Dads of Canada is the way they kept saying it, which I thought was really cool.
The Wrestling Dads of Canada. That sounds like a new wrestling federation.
Sounds
Yes,
weird.
it does.
It's
But because I'm a father of a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old, so I'm at that age where they are rough and tumble play. Talk a little bit about that. Like, what's your stance on roughhousing with kids?
Well, here's what I kind of elaborated with them is I know the body mechanics down to a fine science, right? Being the industry that I'm in. So when I encourage boys to be boys, and if you have like tomboy type girls, I encourage it. Like you, like all that stuff is just building your character and building who you are as a human being. Being rough and physical there's nothing wrong with it. However, when you get dads involved and they're just roughhousing around, a lot of guys don't realize because they're so much bigger. And when they like, I saw one time, I saw this guy grab his kid by the ankles, and like, you got a surplus of pounds. My little guys are small. Like my 4-year-old he's like his mom. He's tall and he's lean and he's got no weight to him. So I saw a father grab his kids by the ankles and just pull his ankles out from them, not realizing how strong you really are compared to your child. Like you are 4 times, if not 5 times, the size of your little guy. So when you're playing with them and you're like, it's all right to be rough and tumble and stuff like that, but you have to realize that you're 5 times the size of them, you're 5 times the weight of them, and like when you do stuff, like when you pull or grab them in a certain way, you can really, really hurt somebody really, really bad, especially when kids reach back. You can pop a shoulder out of place.
Yeah.
You're going to the emergency room. It's so easy to hurt kids. And I know a lot of kids are made of rubber and they just bounce right back and stuff like that, but you just don't want to take the risk. And I've always been super, super aware with my 4 kids when we used to play wrestle and stuff like that, to watch out for joints and to watch out for ligaments, because you can put a ton of damage on a kid. I know one time, Ethan, who's my kid that wrestles, he's the 18-year-old that wrestles. When he was a little guy, all he wanted to do was wrestle all the time. So, of course, being dad, I would wrestle with him. And there's one time I picked him up like every father does, like a power bomb, because every father is a fan somewhere and wants to be Undertaker or whatever. And I gently started to put him down, but I let him go about a foot away from the bed, and he reached back and he hurt his wrist really bad. And that right then I knew, even if I had him up even higher, I would have hurt his elbow, his wrist, his shoulder. So rough and tumble play is great as long as the father that you are is always in control. You will always have to keep your mind, like you can't get lost in the play. You got to be quite a bit aware and just make it about them, not about yourself. And just always be aware that, in an instant you can hurt that kid, your little boy, real bad. So,
but
just way to look at it.
Yeah, tell us about, because I will say, like for me, I one thing I've learned is I let my kids rough and tumble me. I don't do as much. I will sit there and I'll use terms from wrestling. I'll say, want some, come get some, and they'll come and jump on me and tackle me or whatever, and allow them to do that. But what would you recommend? Because there are a lot of dads, like you said, that don't know what the limits are. What would you recommend to a dad that's trying to, they want to roughhouse with their kids because their kids want to? A lot of the dads, especially if they're listening to this, their kids are watching wrestling with them. They're doing it as a family. What would you say the limit is? What should there be? Or is it just know yourself and be careful?
It's basically know yourself and be careful and always protect the limbs and the head. If we're going to break it down into science, it's always have them almost like you always have them hugged in you know how you would give them a hug, a full body hug, is basically if they're going to come at you like you do, right? They attack you. And if you're just going to grab them and put them down and just tickle them or like kind of mess with them and like grab them at the hips and stuff like that and try to make them wiggle away and stuff like that is fine. But you always have to be like more than aware and more cautious and almost coddle them when it comes to their arms, their legs, and their neck. Those are the main focus where you should draw the line, right? That's like if you're trying to pick them up and look like, you know, slam them on the couch or whatever, you best have both those arms inside your one big arm to make sure that when they land, they're not even getting whiplash. Because I see there's one on YouTube where this dad, they're play wrestling and they have it to a soundbite of Jim Ross talking like commentary, and the dad spears his son, gives him a spear. Now it's gentle, it's not a full-blown spear, but you're like the amount of whiplash you're creating for that poor child is you could severely do stuff that you will regret for the rest of your life with the kids like that. Because never ever should you ever put any kind of body movement where you're moving at a speed that you can't control yourself and him at the same time. That's basically how I see it. And that's from years and years and years of being at this business. I think honestly, if dads want to do it, I'm all for them doing it and stuff like that. But I think they should just actually have a chance to get into a wrestling ring or on amateur wrestling mats and have some dude that knows what he's doing professionally, like an amateur wrestler, basically just throw him around for a minute. So he kind of gets the idea of like, oh man, okay, I don't like being thrown around like this. I don't want this to hurt my son. Then it becomes, you create empathy basically.
Yeah. Well, I will admit, I watched one of those, that exact video you were talking about. And I put my kid up on the bed and I was like, oh, I'm going to try this. That was so cool. And then I'm looking and I'm going, wait, how do I do this safely? There is no way to do this safely. And I was like,
there's no way.
Okay. No, I'm not doing it.
Hey, but, and that's good. That's good parenting on your part, because a lot of guys just caution the wind, because dudes are like that. We're impulsive human beings. And we're impulsive creatures. And like, if you don't have forethought on that, you just tackle your boy. You know, if they do that and you clip with your big shoulders, you got big shoulders, you clip them in the jaw.
Yeah.
You know, I'd hate to have your son's jaw wired shut for like how many months. Do you know what I mean? That's not a good look. That is not a good look.
No, it's not.
I think I've hurt my son more as professional wrestlers than I ever did when he was growing up and I wrestled with him in the living room. Because I was always like super safe. Like if I give him a power bomb, I actually put my arm behind him. So it was like supporting his neck, and I would like go through the motion and, you know, put him on the thing. And, you know, when he was like 1 or 2, he'd pick up a pillow and be like, steel chair, and just like whack me with a pillow. But now that, you know, he's an adult and we get in the ring, it's like, you know, it's all these times your mom told me I couldn't discipline you. So, you know, I'm gonna stiff you just a little bit today. No.
Right.
But no, it's cool because I've always been very conscious of like, because, you know, you roughhouse with your kids, all my kids. My middle daughter's 17 turning 18, and she's looking at, you know, starting to train to get into the business. But I've always wrestled with them, but I've always been, like you said, safe, protect the limbs. Like, hey, I'm gonna do this, but do me a favor, grab your shirt like this and tuck your chin. You know, that way, even if you do fall, you're protected. Because, you know, I've seen enough of those injuries on trampolines of just kids playing on trampolines that I'm like, let's be careful. You know, no broken elbows. No. But when I do hurt my son in the ring, though, I have to hear it when I get home because, you know, Mom, my wife doesn't like me hurting her baby.
Well, they never do. They never do.
Well, let me ask you this too. With this is one aspect of taking wrestling and bringing it to family, but being a dad, how do you take what you've learned in the ring, and have you taken that to apply that into your life as a father and even as a husband with your wife?
My whole life is basically I live like my dad lived, and what he taught me, like he hated wrestling. He's not a wrestling guy at all, or he was. He just did not like the sport of wrestling, and only really took interest in it for me. Like he took me to shows before I started in this business, just because I wanted to do it. So that meant a lot. You know what I mean? For him to go outside of his own interest, not liking this at all, and still kind of just swallowing the pill for his son, and then I got into the business right after that. So being a pro wrestler and just being of the lineage of my dad, how my dad used to be, he's the hardest working dude. He's always working. He's super generous, always gave his money away, never had a dime. When he passed away, he had nothing left. But like, he's just the hardest working guy, just an unbelievable soul. And so the same would be said about me, is my kids will always see that nothing is impossible. You should always be trying to get what you want to get out of life, because it's only a vapor. It's only a vapor of time, and it's all gone. 70 years is nothing in the grand scheme of everything. And so I expect my kids to learn by my examples in the ways of just go out and do your thing, do what you want to do in life. But you just gotta, like, whatever you want to do, you have to work daily at it, and you have to try to strive to do better every single day, a little bit better. And that means studying, that means living and breathing what you're doing, and just become like hyper focused. And that's basically how I am. And with my wife now, she loves the March stuff, because I'm always home now. She's as much time as she can get out of me, the better. If I'm home, she's attached to the hip, so she'd much prefer this March thing. She's like, I'm having the time of my life. I know this pandemic's terrible, and I know people are in a bad spot, but I've got to say that this has been the best year of my life. I'm like, that's such morbid thinking. Just to have me at home a little bit more, But it is what it is.
Oh man.
Oh yeah. I understand that completely, because when all this hit, my daughter was only a couple months old. So I had to go home and work from home. My wife's like, wait, so I get help with the baby and 2 other kids all day? Yes. She was excited. And it sounds morbid. She was excited for the quarantine, not necessarily the pandemic itself, but the quarantine of staying home. She loved that. It's kind of lifted here, so she's not liking it so much anymore, but she really loved it back then when I was able to be home all the time. But let me ask you this, and something else. We talked a little bit about this before we got on, but also when it comes to family, another big thing is about your faith. And sometimes it's also your past. And you were talking a little bit about your grandparents and your parents, and their faith, and kind of how what that's meant for you. Can you tell us a little bit about, one, where you're at in your faith, but also like what you believe and why you believe it, how you got there?
Well, my moral compass is because of my family. So I've always had a very strong religious upbringing, Pentecostal people. My family started churches. My grandfather is a starter of churches. There are still, back in this deep woods of New Brunswick, a retirement home for people that's in his name, as well as the church has pictures of him everywhere. It's just, They're very, very, very religious people. My grandfather would shave on Saturday because the Sunday was the day of rest. And if God rests, it sure as toot, and he was going to rest too. And he wouldn't even shave on that day.
Oh, wow.
Like, I'm telling you, like, listen, I come from, like, Peter Youngren and all the top evangelists and ministers. I've met them all. Benny Hinn, every single one of them. I've met every one of them as a young boy, because like they were always around. They're always kicking around like that area. We used to do summers. Summers used to be tent meetings and stuff like that. Every Sunday was church in the morning and at night. I went to church probably 4 times a week, being youth, and then prayer meeting being Tuesday, youth being on Friday, and then special events on Saturday, and then of course 2 times on Sunday. It was just in our DNA, basically, is the way it was. It was always at church. And my parents were of strong faith in the Christian beliefs. And they both, even to the day they both died, were like, believed that. My mom, up until the very end, to her last dying breath, thought that like this was like, don't worry, God's got it. I'm fine. I'll be fine tomorrow. Don't worry. Right?
Yeah.
Like just like a faith that could not be cracked, is how she would live. That faith that would not, you could not sway her. If the devil came and tempted her with whatever, you would find out that she would not be swayed. She's that kind of human being. Just a beautiful souls, both of them, beautiful souls. Where that puts me as my moral compass has always been a little bit better, I think, than most. I don't believe in cheating people. I don't believe in taking advantage of anybody. I don't believe in bullies. I believe in like being fair and being honest and being as truthful as we possibly can, and having a very balanced kind of lifestyle where I feel as though I'm a very balanced human being for the most part. But however, I will say this, that I am, and it's not a bad thing, a doubting Thomas. And it's not a doubting Thomas as in I do not believe in the belief of God and of the Holy Spirit and all that stuff. Not to say that it doesn't. But I would love to put my hands in the wound, put my finger in the wrist, in the wound. And I'm that kind of person. And one time there was a preacher came along and he says, like, as far as disciples, every preacher that's come through here has said nothing but awful things about Thomas, as he was the doubter of Christ, Christ coming back from the dead. But really, every once in a while, like not everybody, but you need a few people to be more like Thomas, to always question where faith lies and where it lies in and stuff, because there's a lot of money changers on the table, as they always say, and you just got to always be aware. So I hold that true. I do have faith that there is a creator, and I do believe that he is this higher being that is omnipresent. How much I feel, I do believe in the story of Jesus Christ, and I believe that he did die on a cross for all of us. But where we go from there, how much I like, it's all in translation then, right? It depends on how you feel. Do you feel as though God is looking at you all the time, picking out your faults and being that person? Or do you feel as though that he's bigger than that, and like whatever is set is set? So it's just one of those things. It's funny that we can get into like like these kind of debates, because then where like no one knows, and no one will ever know until we're all gone, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I stand.
Well, and one of the things that I think is cool, you talked about being a doubting Thomas. And I've heard some people say, well, anybody that doubts, they're terrible people and they just don't get it. And I sit back and I go, well, yeah, but if God didn't expect people to doubt, why does he, throughout time and throughout the Bible and even the way he created things, why does he make stuff that points back to him to give proof of him? So there's always proof of God all the way around, because he knows we aren't always going to get it. We're going to doubt sometimes. And he'll say, hey, look, if you want proof, here's some proof. And that's one of the things that I've always found really cool, is that even there are moments, and as a preacher, there are moments that I sit there and go, what does this even mean? Is this really true about God? And then I sit there and I read it and I go, okay, let me read this. And then all of a sudden something happens in my life or in the life of someone around me that goes, okay, yep, that's really true about God. That happened right there. So, yep, I believe it. Thank you, God. He always seems to be able to show you proof when you need it.
Yeah.
And if you look at all Old Testament guys, anybody that asked for proof, he didn't get mad at them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And like, there's so much that you can take away from all those books that like are just basically they're left to interpretation, and so it's not so concrete as people think it is. Everybody thinks like everybody knows that the apple of the eye that David was to God and to the lineage to Jesus and stuff like that. But like David did some terrible things. It's all about lessons that we're trying to learn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's just, he did some rotten things as king, but it's basically to show you that nobody's perfect. And it's just one small example. My workout partner, my best friend, he's a very, very like a man of faith. And we have like every workout, we work out every day together. I pull him along for all these workouts that go crazy. And he's very much like, one day I'm going to get you back in church. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but like, you're going to have to work very hard to get this to work for both of us. And so like we can, and that's the thing that I love the most. I think that's why our friendship is really strong is, so I grew up in the church. He's like a real man of faith. We can actually have serious debates, and he doesn't get insulted. So like even my mom, God bless my mom, she was such a woman of faith that you couldn't say anything in context or anything that would go against what she believed, because there was like if you brought, like, she didn't even need proof. She just believed like wholeheartedly with nothing but undying faith. And that's wonderful, but that's not me. But you know what I mean? So to bring something up like, hey mom, like, why is this the way it is? And like, was Judas always supposed to be Judas? Like, was it always predetermined? So are we just predetermined to be who we are in life? Is God already gave us free will, but is it really free will? Because like if he didn't turn on Christ, then like we wouldn't have him on the cross and we wouldn't have our sins taken away. And then she would get so mad. It's like, you know what I mean? But with my friend and my buddy, he's great. Like he'll go back and he'll research, and then he'll come back with bullet points and he'll come at me again. And then I have to take a step back, and then I have to like, okay, you know what I mean? It's never a war. It's healthy. So
yeah,
it's always healthy to discuss.
yes.
Oh yeah. Well, and something you said, and I love it because this wasn't actually planned, but when you look at the parallels of what we talked about at the beginning about wrestling looking real and doing it like it's real, having that real, and then coming down and talking about your mom and talking about your wrestling partner and your training partner, and this whole idea that it's real. It's not just a show. And like, even for you, you're talking about, you believe what you believe and you're still figuring other stuff out, but you're not putting up a front. You're not saying I'm a full-blown Christian. I believe everything that you believe and not really believe in it. It's important to know what you believe, but stand by your faith all the way.
Right.
Be willing to talk about and have open discussions.
Oh yeah.
That's one of the big things. And maybe you can give your insight in on this, Tyson. If someone comes to you and they say, yeah, I'm a Christian, and then never want to really talk to you about Christianity because they know, well, he doesn't believe what I believe, so I'm just not going to talk about it. Where do you feel more connected? The guy that stands there and says, well, I'm going to talk to you every single day about it, or the guy that's like, well, we'll just avoid it?
You know what? I'm of the opinion that, like, if you believe in something, you should always, it should be at the forefront. If that is so important to who you are as a human being, like we can put these two together, right? Wrestling and our faith, because one just means the other. Like, one's a lifestyle for me, being wrestling. Like, I practice and I preach what I believe in professional wrestling. So, like, when it comes to competitive old school wrestling, that's what I'm all about. So I'm gonna be upfront about it, and that's the way I feel, as though people of faith, Christian faith and stuff like that should always be upfront and just want, and like, here's the deal. I think that they should talk about it all the time. I'm not against it. And I think that people that get insulted or like get angry at that on both sides, I think that that's the problem, is that, like, if like this is all good. The more discussion we have, the more evolved in thinking we become, and the greater we think, and that we can come to an understanding and, like, maybe a higher level of both faith and consciousness when it comes to Christianity. Because I tell my buddy all the time, like, even if I'm not, like, even if we died tomorrow and there was nothing, Christianity still would be the moral compass that has kept civilization on the path, and kept, like, people striving for righteousness and to be good and to be moral and to be just, more so than not. So even at the end of the day, if you didn't believe in Christ, if you didn't believe in the cross, if you didn't believe in all these things, the testaments and the Old Testament and the New Testament, even if you didn't take anything away, you can at least believe in the fact that Christianity and the thought of Jesus Christ and the thought of God has kept civilization on going on an uphill, instead of, like, digressing. You know what I mean? Because
Yep.
and that's the problem. That's the problem nowadays, is like, you think wild west times, or even before that, like, just the savagery of a human being if he's not kept in check. So that being said, this is all, like, it's all great stuff. Like, it's just, it is what it is, right? It's just, I don't know. I don't, like, it's, for me, I think, I do believe in Jesus. I do believe in the fact that, like, however we want to go about it, there was a man who was a prophet who came down and believed in something and believed that he was the Messiah, and he actually, like, let these people butcher him and take his life for the well-being of people. And that right there, to martyr himself for people, is something so powerful and so different than, like, any other story out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's true love. That's more love than you've seen anywhere else.
Agreed.
And it's hard. I don't know how you can't see that and want to experience that love when you hear about it, when you see that and you go, this happened. How can you not want to be a part of that? It's definitely, that's to me the big thing about that. And we want to say too, if you're out there and you've got questions and you're listening to this, we want to encourage you, reach out to us. If you want to know more about Jesus, if maybe you know about Jesus and maybe you're sitting there and going, well, I don't really talk about my faith at all, or I don't know how to tell other people about my faith. and you want to know more about that, want to talk about that, feel free, reach out to us, hit us up on our Facebook, on our Twitter, on our Instagram at Faith Family Wrestling. Even email us at faithfamilyandwrestling@gmail.com. We're here to talk. And even if you just need prayer, feel free to hit us up. That's what we're here for. And we want to say, Tyson, this has been a pleasure, man. We have enjoyed having you on.
It's been great.
Yeah. We talked last week about sitting at the learning tree, at those that have so much wisdom. And for us, this has been awesome, Tyson, to be able to sit here and just listen to not just your stories, but also to the advice you have and to what you have learned, not only in wrestling, but in life as a parent and in faith. It's been really cool to sit here and listen and hear all that. Before we go, though, do you have anything, what social medias, where can people watch your YouTube stuff? Tell them all about how to watch and keep up with you.
Well, you know what? I'm super easy to get a hold of. Easy as can be. It's just all Tyson Dux. Dux is the name. It's the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie is where I got it.
Oh, nice.
So that's right. Bloodsport, my friend.
Yes, Roy Dukes.
Right. So you can find me anywhere there, and if you happen to pass on YouTube, you'll find a ton of videos. We got over 100 videos right now, which is all just basically tutorials on professional wrestling. And now we're into a new thing where we're just doing actual little matches where we show old school type wrestling, where it's very, very hands-on, very, very solid stuff. If that catches your fancy. So that's all easy. All you have to do is type in Tyson Dux, and I'm very, very Googleable, as I always say. It's very easy to find me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. We've appreciated this. And like we say every week to all of you that have been listening, we hope that in your passion for wrestling and your passion for your family, that you always remember to keep your passion for God at the top, and make sure nothing else trumps that. Thank you guys so much. You all have a blessed week. Peace.